What should a married man do when he is interested in having sex with his wife, but she says no? Now, this is a very important discussion to have because no matter if you're a man living in a sexually abundant marriage or if you are one who is living in a sexless marriage, this scenario hits every man sooner or later. Now, I believe having some kind of mental framework or plan of action of how you're going to handle these situations is a smart move to do because it alleviates a lot of that disappointment and resentment that can build up from your wife rejecting you. So in today's video, we are going to discuss how to navigate this situation, not purely from a place of faith, although that might play into your own decision of how to handle the situation, but primarily using a pragmatic approach, taking into account not only your wife's libido, but your own, while also looking at how to mitigate any negative consequences that may arise from each one of those choices. Also, I'm not going to be focusing on really having to navigate around long-term low libido issues in your marriage. That's a pretty extensive discussion that we don't have time for today. Those true dead bedroom situations are scenarios that are likely going to need a much more deeper look at and approach. So I'll go ahead and direct you over to my school community if you need support for that. But for today, we're just going to focus on what to do in those moments when you have initiated sex and she said no. And finally, I am also not here to make any kind of judgment upon you, to shame you, to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. That is not my place. So while I will share my thoughts and opinions with you as we go along, my goal is to present options and provide you with the necessary information of the risk and benefit of each of those options so that you can decide what decision works best for yourself. And heck, maybe you might even come up with something different, something creative and that might work better for you than anything that I talk about here today. So let's go ahead and get started. When you initiate sex with your wife and she says no, there's really just only two options of how to handle it. You can either, one, do nothing, or you can, two, take care of your own business. And some men would say that there's a third option, which is to get a side piece. But that's really more something that you would consider if this has been a long-term situation, which we're not addressing that today, as I already mentioned. So let's first look at the choice of doing nothing. There is a thought, particular with men of faith, that a man's orgasms should be controlled by his wife. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that they buy into the idea that just because his wife is not interested in sex at the moment, that just means he's flat out of luck. He just has to deal with it and just mentally tough it out. Therefore, it is a woman's sex drive and her willingness to participate that is going to dictate when a man is going to be allowed to have an orgasm. So no matter what the case, whether it's her libido is extremely low, or if it's just died out altogether, or maybe she's just physically unavailable to participate due to some kind of short-term physical problem. Maybe she has a cold, or maybe she's cramping because of her menstrual cycle. But no matter what the case, no matter if it is because she is unwilling or is not there physically to participate, then guys, they just have to deal with it. And this is the message that men are told by everyone. And the reason why men are encouraged to do nothing is because they see this route is the only viable option. What are they going to do? Go sneak off and lock himself in the bathroom and with his phone and a bottle of lotion, which comes with its own set of problems biologically and morally. But what most people fail to acknowledge in this scenario is that taking care of yourself doesn't need to include that digital component with it, which is the part that is dangerous and damaging. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. So what you guys are told instead is that you must take this sexual energy and just mentally raw dog your way through it, or redirect or transmute this energy into something more productive. It's a mental reframing exercise that serves to take this godlike energy expounded upon men. For some reason, it's only for you guys, because apparently women aren't sold this story. We're not told about how this sexual energy should be transmuted. So is your raw energy superior to ours? I guess this lady's just got the raw end of the deal, but I digress. So you guys are told to transmute this sexual energy into doing something else, some activity that's more productive. Maybe you can get some of those home projects done that you have been putting off. Or maybe you should just go do some more pull-ups or go for a run. You know, something that's going to serve you better than getting that cheap dopamine hit that you would otherwise get with just a device. And this mental reframing is a proven technique that can work by merely changing how you're looking at something to see it from a different perspective. And this allows you to rewrite that story that you have going on in your brain of what something means. The problem that I have with this narrative is that there's no acknowledging that just like the other alternative, it's still a cope. It's just a different one. It still keeps a man in a woman's sexual frame. It still keeps a man beholden to her and her libido. It just sells that frame as being a virtuous and morally superior choice. And isn't it interesting that nobody is out there trying to hold women to that same higher moral standard in that area? I mean, I'm out here on YouTube and on X almost on the daily, like just screaming at the ladies, imploring them to be a better wife and a better woman in this area. But you won't hear it from society as a whole, and you're not going to hear it from your church, and you certainly aren't going to hear it from your wife. She's not going to all of a sudden come to this epiphany on her own that maybe she should step up to match your libido instead of you being the one that always has to come down to match hers all the time. Why is that? Who decided that it's the man who has to be the one who makes the concession all the time? So there's this big hypocrisy to this whole situation where it's always on the men. It's the man and only the men who have to make the sexual concessions, but women just get a pass. So all you hear is how men should be placating to his wife's libido, that having a sexual standard would be just deemed to be unacceptable. And that the only solution offered for men is convincing him that they should be using that sexual frustration for good. And as far as I know, there are very few people out there, male or female, telling married men to reclaim their sexual frame by encouraging men to decide for themselves to use your own mind and to be self-validated in this area. Especially those people who are telling you there's only one correct and right way to handle your sexual relationship with your wife. So men are told that they have to just be okay with whatever amount of sex his wife is willing to bestow upon him. And then on top of that, they're sold that ejaculations only have value if they come about by having sex with his wife. So you're sold that you shouldn't be upset or feel rejected if your wife says no, because guess what? This just gives you another opportunity to build your character and to use this magical, superhuman sexual energy that's apparently only bestowed upon the men, and the women don't have this special magical energy. And we're going to then take that energy and use it towards something that's this approved, productive activity instead. But whoever said a solo session is not productive? Does the value of an orgasm come exclusively if your wife participates in its achievement? Because I have to tell you, I've had some solo sessions that were quite productive. Because the dopamine and all the other feel-good chemicals, when they're released, they have no idea if your wife participated or not. But Monica, solo sex sucks. And the point is so I can share that experience with my wife. I understand. And that's why I'm such a huge stickler for the ladies to show up and be sexually generous for you guys. So yes, there's immense value to having sex with your spouse. But it doesn't mean that if she doesn't participate, there's no value there. And can we just get real? That sometimes sex within a marriage isn't always about that emotional connection. That sometimes it's just about sheer, raw, feral horniness. Hey, I'm just swinging in real quick to make sure that you have hit that subscribe button, because we all know there's no such thing as too much Monica in your life. Also, I want to let you know about my community on School. It's a platform that allows us to take these conversations and these ideas that we start right here on YouTube and take them into a more in-depth conversation. So if you're having relationship problems you want my opinion on, head over there now, and I'll put that link in the description as well. And finally, everyone, we all know that Christmas is coming, and we all know you guys are awful at shopping, and I'm going to help you out right here. So head over and get yourself a Cup Cozy pillow. It's a soft, portable cup holder where you can put all your drinks, your snacks, your remotes, everything that you need, exactly where you want it. I'm the inventor and the owner, Amazon or cupcozypillow.com. Now that I've solved your shopping dilemma, let's get back to the episode. And can we just get real? That sometimes sex within a marriage isn't always about that emotional connection. That sometimes it's just about sheer, raw, feral horniness. So emotional connection will come from that, but there is also a pure physical benefit that has some value to all orgasms, whether those are shared or solo. So there's almost like this nobility, this glorification being sold to men, whether they are single or married, about the virtues of semen retention. And they are sold this idea that their wife should be the holder of the keys of all of his sexual activity, including what he does with his own body. And this idea of the the health benefits of semen retention. This is not something new. There's a challenge happening right now. It's called the No Nut November, where participants abstain from ejaculation for an entire month. And it's done so people can practice self-control and get these supposed magical energy that is derived from doing so. Although there has not been a whole lot of evidence supporting this idea that there's a whole lot of health benefits that come to doing so. But what we do have pretty great evidence for is the benefit of regular ejaculation for men, especially when it comes to reducing the risk for prostate cancer. So the question I want you to consider and to ask yourself in this whole thing is, who gets to decide what is productive or not productive for a man? And I believe the only one who should be doing so is the man himself. So while I believe that this do nothing and transmute this energy comes from a place of good intent, it still subjugates men to a woman's authority. I don't even know how a man can have the proper masculine frame if it is his wife who gets to decide whether a man has an orgasm or not. Like, mommy, I've been a good boy. Am I allowed to do this? What I believe is the most effective way in handling this situation is to execute the proper order of operations. And the proper order of operations is a sequence or flow that you go through when your sexual energy arises. And the first step is that you will invite your wife to participate in a good time with you. Now, there are a multitude of ways to properly initiate, and we don't have time to go over all of that today. That's not this video. But if your wife is physically present, or she will be present shortly, then you will approach her and invite her to a good time. And if she declines for whatever reason, then you can choose how you're going to spend that sexual energy, whether that is with a solo party or redirecting to other endeavors. But men are not told that it's theirs decision and theirs alone. They are told that it's sex with your wife or nothing. Taking care of yourself isn't even an option in that equation because the downside is just too severe and morally repugnant. And much of that I agree with. But nobody ever brings up other choices, like masturbation without the use of this adult online content, or using it sparingly or minimally with full knowledge of his wife. Now, please note, I did not say consent of his wife. I said with knowledge from his wife. Because once again, seeking consent is handing over the sexual frame to her, and that is not something I would advise you to do. And even the subject of viewing adult online content is not even so black and white. There's a lot of factors there that you must take into account as to how damaging it is and what exactly are you looking at. So I just can't get behind this all or nothing approach where it's sex with your wife or nothing at all. And I just don't think it's a realistic approach that is going to work for the majority of men. And I just prefer to work in reality instead of some kind of optimistic idealism. So I think a better approach is something that is much more individualized with a proper risk-reward assessment, a know thyself kind of approach. And that is something that can work for the majority of men. And so it very well may be that you might be the type of man that you know yourself well enough that you can't even use just a little bit of that because it's going to be a full-blown problem. And so if you know that about yourself, then great. Don't use it. Just like if you're an alcoholic, you wouldn't want to even keep an ounce of alcohol. You wouldn't even take one little sip, right? Because it's going to be an all or nothing thing for you. Or just like these people who can't eat just one or two Oreos. They have to eat the whole package. You know, if you're that type of person, maybe you just abstain altogether. I know for me, I have zero self-control when it comes to those little, during the Valentine's Day season, there's these little chalk candy hearts, the Brock's candy hearts. It can't be the Sweet Tart brand. Those are no good. It has to be Brock's. But man, those things are like the closest thing to drugs. I've never done drugs, but I envision that it's probably the closest I'm going to get to ever having that sensation where I'm just out of control. So I know this about myself. So I only allow myself 2 bags a year, and that's it. But I do that because I know myself and I know my weaknesses. And that's the entire point of this video, is that it's you making the choice based upon utilizing the proper order of operations, seeking your wife first, and then if she declines, deciding how you're going to use that sexual energy to meet your own needs. And you're going to be doing that so that you stay within your own masculine sexual frame. But this is not what men are being told. And they are told you only have the 2 options, sex with your wife or redirecting the sexual energy to activities approved by others. And the reason these are the only 2 options presented to men is because they are told that taking care of yourself is wrong morally. It's somehow some kind of violation against your wife. And some would even go as far as to proclaim that to be cheating. And that's just absurd. Now, I will say that this do nothing approach might work with men who get sex on a regular activity or periodically get turned down by his wife. But it's just not going to be a realistic option for men who are living in a sexless marriage. And that's a lot of them. There's 25 to 50% of all marriages are sexless. The other marriages that are not sexless, but the man still wants more. There's a gap in the libido desire between him and his wife. So the do nothing approach may be okay if you have a small libido gap or you're a couple who has a relatively healthy sex life. However, this is not the majority of most of the men in marriages. And I think it's a very unrealistic ask for a man who is biologically wired with very high levels of testosterone, which is the hormone responsible for both men and women's libidos, to just accept the fact that he has to live with his wife's low libido and even celibacy if that's what she so chooses, and to be expected to redirect that energy for the rest of his life. And sure, you don't want to give in to every biological urging or prompting just because it pops up. We would never encourage anybody to eat a candy bar every single time they were craving something sweet. We know as adults that that's just not probably a smart move, but once in a while likely isn't going to be much of a problem. So we just have to start going more towards a common sense type of approach here and stop with all these black and white or all or nothing approaches, because it's simply an unrealistic ask for the majority of couples. Asking a man to accept his wife's constant refusal of sex and expecting her husband to be okay with it is not realistic. There's just going to be way too much anger and resentment built up by the guy over time, and it's going to cause him to be a shell of the man and essentially mentally divorce his wife. So why is it always on the man and never on the woman? Why do we never hold the women's feet to the fire in this topic, or really any other topic if you think about it? Now, is there an approach or a way where a man can still take care of his own business when his wife declines without all of that negative consequences that come with using adult digital content? And the answer appears to be to just take care of his own business without using it. So let's go ahead and take a moment to pull up this chart here. So what we have here is the consequences of taking care of your own business, and it's broken up by daily and weekly, and doing so with and without a device. What you see here in the red is that there's a lot of negative consequences that come with daily use of adult online content with a device, okay? Every single day with a device, there's going to be a lot of problems. Very easy to see here. But if you go to the same scenario, but now it's only weekly, once a week versus daily, that negative consequence just takes a tank. It goes down from 60% to 20%. So we have a significant dump just in decreasing the frequency. So if you're taking care of that business, even using the device, it's not really much of a problem. And then if you go over to the daily habit in blue, the daily habit without using the device, even if it's every single day, it's still not much of a problem. And then finally, if you look in the green, this is if you take care of your business weekly without the use of the device. The area in green, you see how little negative impact come in. So we got to really kind of use some common sense here, guys, of, all right, if you're taking care of yourself every single day with a device, it's going to be a problem. But I don't think that most men are in this case. You can mitigate those negative consequences by switching down to weekly or not using a device or a combination thereof. So this is what I'm saying. We can't have an all or nothing approach here because I just don't think it's going to work for most men. And you may say, well, Monica, why even do it if there's going to be negative consequences at all? And my response to you would be that's because I only have the chart up that has the negative consequences. Why don't we take a minute to pull up the benefits of doing so? Because this is what people are missing. They're only looking at the negative side. They're not looking at any of the positive side that comes out of it. And what you see here is there's positive outcomes across the board, no matter which way you use it. So you can't pull up and argue against how profoundly bad it is when there's also benefits to it. That's what I'm saying here. You got to look at both sides. So for a marriage or a long-term relationship to endure, a man must reclaim his sexual frame. So you must decide for yourself, weighing all the positives, all the negatives, thinking about your libido, your wife's libido, any particular set of individual values or religious standards that you may have for yourself. And you weigh all this together and come up with your own plan that you choose to adhere to. And so when you're reclaiming your sexual frame as man, I'm going to ask you to consider 3 things. The first thing is that you will no longer use your wife's libido as a standard or reference point for your own sexual activity. The second is that you will use the proper order of operations to seek connection with your wife first before taking care of your own business. If she's not physically present, you can bypass this step unless she's going to be home shortly, because you don't want to ruin dinner by snacking, if you know what I mean. Third, you're going to stop seeking permission from your wife about whether or not you're allowed to have a solo party. You're not going to ask permission or seek her approval of whether or not you can provide pleasure for yourself, because doing so puts you in a de facto female-led marriage where she gets to decide what is right or wrong for you. She becomes a mother figure and the sole arbiter of your sin. When speaking about sexual frame, it is very important also that you are transparent. Being a properly framed man means that you must be self-validated, answering only to yourself and to God, which means that you are not going to hide the fact that you periodically choose to take care of your own business from your wife. I mean, you don't have to wave it in their face. Hey, babe, look what I did today. You don't need to do that. But men will hide the fact that they do this because they are too ashamed, or they are too scared to deal with the backlash that's going to come and the drama about what his wife's going to have to say about it. And your inability to handle your wife's drama and that comes out of this, that's on you. That's something that you're going to need to work with and to strengthen your frame to be able to handle that. Because the fact is, most women are not going to be super excited by this idea, especially if it involves a device. But you know what? You invited her to the party and she declined. So that's on her. She had first dibs. And if it really did bother her, as much as she says that it does, then she will know that she's going to have to step it up next time. And she knows ahead of time that this is how your decision-making process is going to happen. She'll stop for a second before she says no and think to herself, well, if I say no, he might be off taking care of his own business, and I don't like that. So I guess I will step up after all. So tell her, this is exactly how I'm going to be handling this from this point forward. I will always come to you first. But if you decline, there might be times I decide to take care of my own business. And she can then move forward in the future, having that information to make better decisions and choices. Her willingness or non-willingness to participate with you is really going to speak into how much she is put off with you taking care of your own business. Now, in the beginning, this is going to ruffle her feathers. She's either going to become more sexually available for you, or it's going to force the both of you to look at the realities of much deeper problems that need to be addressed. So what do you think? Do you think that men should be the ones who always have to lower their libidos to their wives? Let me know in the comment. And if you haven't already checked out my 5 excuses wives use to avoid sex video, it's on absolute fire right now. Hit that. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.